Hello, everyone. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic host of Bachelor Nation News. I hope everyone's doing okay this Friday morning. Here on the West Coast, we woke up to news that Roe v. Wade has officially been overturned. We knew this was essentially going to happen. There were death threats and protests of Supreme Court justices, but they ended up going with the decision that they had intended to go with. Of course, it was leaked. If you don't know too much about this story, I'm going to get into it. My goal here is not brevity. My goal here is compassion for constituents of the United States, some of which don't know what to do. You might be stuck in a battle between being on a side you've always supported and unwilling to question your beliefs because it's an us versus them mentality. This goes for both sides of a real archaic two-sided political system that we have, which is way more three-dimensional. Two-dimensional is a square. Three-dimensional is a cube. There are people on all different sides of different issues. The overturning of Roe v. Wade doesn't have to be an us versus them. It doesn't have to be, well, I'm on this side, so I support this, or I believe in God, so I support this. It doesn't have to be as simple as that. So what I ask of you guys out there is that you sort of digest the content we're about to go through in a way that's completely open to thought, completely open to looking at things from a different perspective, unless I'm either pro people living or pro people dying, because that's not what it is. That's not what it is. I've seen with our channel, people get triggered through certain conversations we have on live streams, and it's too much for them to talk about. And I understand the political system is so messed up. The mainstream media, the cable news is so messed up. It's so fear-based. If it bleeds, it leads. They're there trying to rile people up. I don't want to rile anybody up right now. I want to talk about things that we can do moving forward. This Supreme Court decision is finalized. It's basically saying that there is not federal protection for abortions. And I will get things wrong in this video. Trust me, I am not an expert. But now they're saying, look, it's got to go back to the states. And on some sort of blueprint level about how the world's supposed to work, maybe there's an argument to be made for that being the correct decision. I am not a legal scholar. I'm not a constitutional scholar. And I know a lot of people in other countries go, why are we married to a document that was created in the 1700s? Why are we married to not changing certain things? And I understand that question. We're going to jump right into it. So, of course, we posted, and you'll get a lot of, that was from yesterday right there. We get a lot of comments from people in Bachelor Nation speaking out. Of course, Nate says, my heart goes out to the millions of women who feel unsafe, uncared for, heartbroken, and scared because of this ridiculous ruling today. And my only edit to that statement would be, of course, it's not just a burden put on women. It's a burden put on humanity, because it's not just about the fear-mongering that people want it to be. Ripping a baby out of the womb. These are terms that are used by pastors, from presidents, politicians, people in your community. That's fear-based. Whenever you're being sold anything based on fear, take a step back. Take a big step back and digest what decision and what elicit a feeling they want you to feel, and calm yourself down, because that's not how we should kind of be operating. Others have commented. Gabby, our future Bachelorette, says devastating. Pilot Rachel, the other Bachelorette, also shares about it. And who isn't? Tayshia. Of course, we love when Tayshia's sharing. So here's Tayshia. She posts this letter from Michelle Obama, which I'm going to read for you guys. I am heartbroken today. I'm heartbroken for people around this country who just lost the fundamental right to make informed decisions about their own bodies. Informed is a big word here, because most people, the majority, aren't callous, it's a very difficult decision to make. I am heartbroken that we may now be destined to learn the painful lessons of a time before Roe was made law of the land, a time when women risked losing their lives getting illegal abortions, a time when the government denied women control over their reproductive functions, forced them to move forward with pregnancies they didn't want, and then abandoned them once their babies were born. This is what our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers lived through, and now we are here. We are again. So yes, I am heartbroken for the teenage girl full of zest and promise who won't be able to finish school, or live the life she wants because her state controls her reproductive decisions, for the mother of a non-viable pregnancy who is now forced to bring that pregnancy to term, for the parents watching their child's future evaporate before their very eyes, for the healthcare workers who can no longer help them without risking jail time. Now, there are plenty of studies that are done that show that banning abortions only bans safe abortions. People will still get procedures. They'll still do what they need. And a lot of people still don't understand, and I think it's because their hearts aren't open to listen, that abortions, they don't just mean, it's complicated. So there are literal stories happening right now in the news of people that had a partial miscarriage. And that means the baby's not viable. The fetus is not viable. And due to abortion laws, the doctors aren't allowed to remove the rest of that unfortunate miscarriage. And because of that, people are at risk of dying of sepsis and other disease. This exists in our first world country that we live in. And this is now going to be, a couple dozen states where they can't get these procedures done. There are hospitals that are operating under very, very archaic laws. And we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with all this. Michelle continues, when we don't understand our history, we are doomed to repeat its mistakes. In this country, our futures are tied together in a delicate tapestry that we each have a hand in making. Too often, cynicism or indifference makes us feel like we don't have a say in weaving it, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The more we allow pessimism to push us further into helplessness, the less we will be empowered to help create the kind of country we want to live in. The horrifying decisions will have devastating consequences, and it must be a wake-up call, especially to the young people who will bear its burden. I know this is not the future you chose for your generation, but if you give up now, you will inherit a country that does not resemble you or any of the values you believe in. This moment is difficult, but our story does not end here. It may not feel like we are able to do much right now, but we can and we must. If you're like me and you want to get started right now, I encourage you to channel your frustration and anger into action by getting involved. Organizations like Planned Parenthood in the United States of Women, among many others, have resources you can look to if you want to help others, if you need help yourself. Yeah, if states are going to have individual rights regarding these procedures and the legality of, then people need to organize in a way where every single state has people running for office that have values that are for the people. This is why I struggle with the two-party political system, Democrats and Republicans, because the people that are on the progressive side of the Democratic Party, there are plenty of Republicans that support them. I know firsthand of people that went from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump. They want somebody who isn't part of the establishment. And there are plenty of progressives that want universal health care, that want a minimum wage that works for people. They want safety, nets put in place for the middle class, because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I believe most Republicans want that too. A lot of progressives want less money spent on military. That doesn't mean to shrink the military, or that doesn't mean to defund the police. That means to take a higher tax from the very rich, the marginal tax, which means only taxing those that make above a certain amount. That doesn't mean if you make $11 million and there's a marginal tax at the $10 million mark, you don't get charged that 45% tax rate on the first $10 million. You just get charged on that next million. Wouldn't that be fair? For all the people that are making tons of money, for the trillions that have been, that the government has, thrown into the stock market, the bailouts of the banks, the bailouts of the airlines. Wouldn't it be nice? And, part of me wants to play the national anthem, but part of me doesn't feel like that represents our country as it stands right now. And I think most people want these values. So we're going to have to look on the states, individually to find people. And we're going to see this fall if the overturning of Roe v. Wade has a effect, I would say ripple, but I would hope a bigger effect than a ripple, a tsunami, on local government, on state government, that they start making decisions that help those. Why is it that a lot of the states that are banning abortions are also the states with insane levels of opioid addiction, insane levels of a lower middle class or lower class that feels no way out of a situation? We're too busy worrying about some of the, tick-tacky parts of politics that we need to go back to a very big collective look on how we can help each other. It's not an issue about whether you believe someone, it's become a cultural divide and a moral issue, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be way more nuanced. Abortion can be legal and you can still believe that you wouldn't want to do that yourself. That's called pro-choice. Pro-choice doesn't just mean pro-abortion. Pro-choice means letting people make an informed and very tough decision about what they want to do about their life moving forward. And I think when most people are pressed on it, they actually go from pro-life to pro-choice. Most people I know go, look, I'm pro-life, but if you want to do with your body what you want to do, and I go, listen, I don't want to call someone an idiot. Listen, Mary, that means you're pro-choice, okay? Tayshia posts, leaving this here for those that want to educate themselves on the history of Roe v. Wade. I'm honestly in shock over the verdict, progressing or regressing. So there's a lot to get into and a lot to talk about, and we can only make this video so long here. The case Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization centered on the state of Mississippi's appeal of a lower court ruling that struck down the state's law banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy as unconstitutional. Mississippi's appeal to the Supreme Court, they asked that the court not only uphold its abortion ban, but to overturn Roe and rule there is no constitutional right to abortion. Their opinion today effectively overturns the precedent set in Roe and hands the decision of abortion legally over to the states. And now the idea that, and this is where it gets kind of cloudy, right? Because it's like, the Supreme Court also just decided that the federal government could issue a ruling over guns rights. So it's like, why can certain rights be federally protected and certain rights be states protected? I don't have an answer to that. People are worried not just what this means for their state now, but what other decisions might happen going forward. And as we know, the Supreme Court in the last 5, 6, 8 years, it wasn't put together legally. Okay, if we want to get into that argument, it's a separate argument. But Mitch McConnell delayed a proper Supreme Court hearing when Obama was president. And then, of course, the Supreme Court was packed when Trump was president. Now, you can also look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the fact that she should have stepped down before her untimely death, which happened under Trump's presidency, which allows him to elect another person. But Mitch McConnell's core being has been to pack the courts, not in a way where they're very centrist. They've put people in that are very specifically, pro their agenda. It sucks. A total of 26 states are certain or likely to ban abortion, whether through trigger laws, pre-Roe bans, 6 or 8 week bans, or near total bans. Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming. And I had nice people in our audience, shout out to Kelly, who told me that places like Kentucky, you can't get a divorce while you're even pregnant. So it's not just about the rights, the pro-life rights, it's what follows those rights in certain states, how archaic states are. There's states where you can't file for DV. I'm not saying these words because they're trigger words on YouTube. If you're in a marriage, there's states where you're forced to carry a pregnancy from your rapist. These are horrible things. Live look, demonstrator scales, Frederick Douglass Bridge following Supreme Court decision. Let's go live here and see if they're still up there. Still up there right there. I don't say this with any amount of sensationalism. Blood will be shed over this decision. I'm going to close this out, and then we're going to go forward here. Clarence Thomas, in his opinion, concurred with Dobbs, calls on his court colleagues to next overrule Griswold, which is contraception, same-sex sex, same-sex marriage, and to go on from there. So a precedent has been set that there is a conservative, I'd call it not traditional conservative, but very extremist conservative court leaning, where 9 judges can decide the fate of 300 plus million people. Scary times.
That has stood for more than 50 years is no more in the United States. The Supreme Court just ruled 5-4 in the Mississippi abortion.
I think it was 6-3.
Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. That ruling overturns Roe versus Wade. And
Katie Thurston just shared that. She shared Planned Parenthood and some other literature. that has been shared. So we're going to keep going with the story. Real News, No Bullshit is a pretty fair Instagram account I've been following with the Ukraine war, and they are boots on the ground. They're pretty, they don't have much of a bias when it comes to news, as far as I can tell. You can let me know what you think. And they share a lot of facts. They just shared this. DC call to action. Night of rage. The night SCOTUS overturns Roe v. Wade. Hit the streets. You said you'd riot. To our oppressors, if abortions aren't safe, you're not either. Jane's revenge. And of course, riots and violence happen when people feel like their voices weren't heard. That's when the democracy ends. When people feel like their voices weren't heard, as we know, you can disagree with this, you can look into it for yourself. A majority of people in the United States support safe and legal abortion. That doesn't mean people support, getting late-term abortions. That means with specific parameters around when it can be done, a majority of people support that. Now, it's important that a doctor, they sign the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. If a doctor decides that a pregnancy is not viable and the mother is at risk of her life, a doctor, along with the pregnant woman, should be able to make tough decisions and not fear that they would be arrested for that. Someone shared their theory on what's going to happen now. With states now being able to create their own laws on banning abortion, in the official document it is stated that they are going after gay marriage and contraception next. Republicans are going to implement their bans in order to get anyone that does not align with their values to move out of their states. With everyone besides Bible-thumping Republicans moved out of their state, voting in their states now become a sure thing, and they know they will keep getting all the representation in the local government, Congress, and Senate. Once they start fully controlling swing states, they will essentially take over the entirety of the U.S. government. Now, this is obviously fatalistic. The problem that I have is that, yeah, sure, there's still 30 states or so where abortion will be legal. A lot of people that need abortions can't travel. They're living paycheck to paycheck, or they're teenagers and their parents would disown them. There's so many different scenarios where it's important to have Planned Parenthood in inner cities and in places where people can access them as simply as taking a bus. The other issue is that, as we know, senators, congressmen, regardless of their political party, when they need an abortion, they find a way to get one. We know that they've, plenty of stories of congressmen that have gotten abortions for their mistress, in other situations like that. These exist. What would overturning Roe mean for birth control? It could have implications far more than access to abortion. Medical and legal experts say it could open the door to restrictions on other types of reproductive health care. To say that we are incredibly concerned would, I think, actually be putting it mildly, said Dr. Aurora, chair of the ethics committee at the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Aurora said the decision could have far-reaching implications for other types of care, including birth control, emergency contraception known as Plan B, trans-affirming healthcare, and fertility treatments such as in vitro fertilization, which can produce leftover embryos. This threatens our ability to take care of patients on a daily basis. So that's where we stand, folks. Again, please take whatever time you need to mourn and feel your feelings. When we move forward from that, we're looking at a big election this fall. I, for one, do not care about voting one way versus the other. Most of the progressive candidates I vote for have sort of been silenced by the Democratic establishment in the first place. We know Bernie Sanders was pretty much robbed of a fair election in the primaries against Hillary Clinton. These are facts. Debbie Wasserman, the DNC chair, letters came out that she actively colluded with people to have voter suppression. So it exists there. Gerrymandering exists from both parties, but right now it's a big deal with the Republican Party, where states and districts are being rewritten so that people's voices are not heard. In the majority, it's easier to quantify, and win elections that way. So the issues in both directions. What we need to do is really open our hearts and really take the time to think about who we want to represent us in this government, and taking the government back so it is for the people, not a bunch of rich elites that make decisions for us. Because, as I remind you, they will find abortions and make them and get them. We know the stories that have just come out about certain congresswomen that completely vote against the way that they have actually acted in real life, and we need to call it that hypocrisy, because they're using you. They're using your religion. They're using your kindness to vote against certain things, and you're being manipulated. And I think it's important people know that. It's not as simple as, well, I support life. It's not as simple as that. I hope that you've listened this far and you're able to keep your heart open. And if you've trusted my content over the last couple of years, trust that you'll keep your heart open to, I guess, see what's next and see who we vote for. This video doesn't deserve outro music.